You've got a savings account you're quietly proud of. $41,000 built one paycheck at a time, sitting there like proof you did something right. You check it now and then just to feel the number. Responsible? Safe? Yours. Now meet Grace. Same company as you, same job title. Same $52,000 salary, 2 floors up in the same apartment building. She started saving the exact same month you did, 10 years ago. Her account today isn't sitting at $41,000, it's just past $300,000. Same paycheck, same decade, same habit of setting money aside. She didn't inherit a dime, didn't land some raise you never got, didn't gamble on a lucky stock pick. She did exactly one thing differently on one specific afternoon, and it had nothing to do with earning more. Here's the uncomfortable part. Saving was never the finish line. It's the on-ramp, and almost nobody actually merges. I'm Nick, and today I'll walk you through exactly how Grace merged, step by step. Drop a like and let's get into it. Let's start with something nobody likes hearing. Saving money by itself is a slow way to become poorer. Not broke, just quietly, politely poorer, 1 year at a time in a way you barely notice until it's already happened. Here's the math behind it. $1 tucked away back in the year 2000 buys you roughly 51 cents of actual stuff today. Half of it simply vanished. Not stolen, not spent, just eaten away because prices kept climbing every year while your dollar sat there proud of itself, going nowhere. That's inflation. It's a tax nobody ever votes on, and everyone pays it anyway. Cash is the one part of your financial life that is mathematically guaranteed to lose that fight. Now, people push back and say, sure, but my savings account earns interest, and it does. The best high-yield accounts right now pay somewhere around 4%, which sounds decent on paper. The catch is inflation has also been running near 4%. So on a good day, you're basically treading water, and on an average day, you're slowly sinking, while the little number on your screen keeps insisting you're fine. That's the trap hiding inside cash. It feels safe because the number never drops. You open the app, it says the same amount or a touch more, and you file it under responsible adult. But safe and shrinking are two very different things. Your money is technically employed, it's just calling in sick every single day while still collecting a paycheck. Wealthy people figured this out a long time ago, and their answer wasn't to save harder, it was to stop letting money sit still. Here's the reframe that changes everything. For the rich, cash isn't a destination, it's a waiting room. Every dollar that lands there has somewhere else it's meant to go next. So let's look at where wealthy people actually keep their money, because the numbers here are genuinely surprising. Break down how different Americans hold their net worth, and a pattern jumps out fast. The bottom half of the country, by wealth, keeps most of what they own tied up in exactly two things: their house and their car. Real estate and a depreciating vehicle, that's basically the whole portfolio. Stocks barely register. Now look at the top 1%. Their money lives somewhere completely different. Business ownership, stock holdings, index funds, income-producing real estate, and cash. The wealthiest households keep only around 2% of their total wealth sitting in cash. 2%. Everything else is out there working. Sit with that gap for a second because it basically sums up this entire video. The average household's biggest asset is a car that loses value the moment the engine starts. The wealthy household's biggest assets are things that grow while they sleep, and it snowballs into something almost hard to accept. The top 10% of American households own roughly 90% of all stock in the country. Not 90% of their own holdings, 90% of all of it that exists. So next time the news says the market hit a record high, understand who's actually collecting most of that gain. It doesn't land evenly, it rains down almost entirely on the people who already own the assets, which is exactly why owning even a small slice, even starting late, matters more than nearly anything else you'll ever do with money. And here I want to be straight with you because this channel doesn't sell fairy tales. Some of that gap isn't about knowledge at all, it's about surplus. And we'll circle back to that honestly before we're done because most videos like this one conveniently skip it. But part of the gap really does come down to this. Wealthy people have a system for what happens to a dollar the moment it's earned. Most people don't. They earn, they spend what they spend, and whatever's left just piles up in checking like laundry nobody's folded. No plan. It just accumulates. Wealthy people plan for it, and the plan itself isn't some secret formula. It's a sequence, and I'm handing you the entire thing in order, starting right now. Step 1 is the line, the single most important line in your entire financial life. And to see what happens on either side of it, let's give that $41,000 saver from the start a name. Call him Greg. Greg is you if you never cross the line. Grace is you if you do. Same salary, same building, same 10 years. One of them crossed over. Let's find out where that line actually sits. The line is your emergency fund. The rule most people already know is 3 to 6 months of expenses, parked somewhere safe and boring, so a busted transmission or a sudden layoff doesn't torch your entire life. That part gets repeated everywhere, but here's what usually gets left out. Wealthy people don't treat that number as a savings goal, they treat it as a border. Everything below that line stays in cash because its whole job is safety. Everything above that line is not allowed to sit in cash because its job is growth. The second they hit that number, the overflow gets put to work automatically. No meeting required, no burst of courage needed. So picture your own number. Whatever 3 to 6 months of your life actually costs, that's your line. Every dollar you own above that right now is a dollar currently sitting in a waiting room, forgetting it has a job to do. That was Grace's one specific afternoon. 10 years back, once she'd banked a few months of expenses, she sat down for about 20 minutes and set up an automatic transfer that swept everything above her cushion straight into investments every single month before she ever had the chance to touch it. That's the whole move. She turned her overflow into a river instead of a puddle. Greg hit that same cushion around the same time and then just kept saving into that same account. The money stacked up right at the edge of the line and never once crossed it. A decade later, that habit cost him roughly $260,000 for the crime of doing nothing, very responsibly. That's the line. Most people spend their whole lives climbing toward it, then set up camp right there. Wealthy people touch it and immediately shove everything else over the edge. Fine, but pushed where exactly? That's step 2, and it's the part that quietly makes people rich without them ever feeling clever about it. It comes down to order of operations, because not every investing dollar is equal. Some of them are already worth 50 to 100% more than the day you earned them, before they have grown a single percent on their own. Let me unpack that strange sentence and hang on to one detail for step 4, because there's a single number buried in there that quietly decides whether you retire comfortably or retire with an extra house. Most people never even notice it. The first stop for your overflow, if it's available to you, is a workplace retirement match. If your employer matches, say, the first 4 or 5% you contribute, that isn't a perk. That's a coupon for free money that expires every year you don't redeem it. Put in $1, they hand you $1 back. That's 100% return before the market has done a single thing. Skipping that is basically the financial equivalent of leaving a paycheck in the office fridge. After the match, deal with any genuinely toxic debt, the credit card kind charging you 20+%, because paying that off is a guaranteed return no investment on earth can promise you. Then fund the accounts the tax code actually rewards. And here's a quiet one. Nearly everyone overlooks. If you're on the right kind of health plan, there's an account where money goes in untaxed, grows untaxed, and comes out untaxed too. It's the only spot in the entire tax code that pulls off that triple play. Wealthy people treat it like a stealth retirement account. Most people treat it like a drawer for $40 toward new glasses. And if keeping that whole order straight sounds exhausting, good, because the real superpower was never the sequence itself. It's what makes you never have to think about the sequence again. That's automation, step 3, and it might be the single most powerful idea in this entire video. Here's the proof. When companies make people opt into a retirement plan, meaning you have to actively choose it and sign up, roughly 64% of people participate flip the default so everyone's automatically enrolled, meaning investing happens unless you actively opt out. And participation jumps to 94%. Same people, same paychecks, same willpower. The only thing that changed is whether the money moved on its own. That gap between 64 and 94 is basically the entire difference between how we imagine wealth gets built and how it actually gets built. We picture monk-like discipline standing at the checkout line, but consistently wealthy people never lean on that. They lean on defaults, moving money automatically the day after payday, so investing happens before your brain gets a vote. Think about your own month. Willpower at the tail end of a long day, staring at a checkout screen, loses. Willpower always eventually loses because it's a limited resource and the whole world is built to drain it. So take yourself out of the equation entirely. Automate the transfer, and suddenly your own laziness starts working for you instead of against you. It's about the only time in life where being lazy actually makes you richer. Automation also shields you from something sneakier than overspending, which is you in a full-blown panic. There's a long-running study tracking how the average investor actually performs against the very funds they own, and year after year, the average investor earns less than their own investments. Read that twice. They underperform the thing they're literally holding. How does that even happen? Because they get spooked when the market drops and sell right at the bottom, then get excited when it's soaring and buy back in at the top. They do the exact opposite of the plan at the exact worst possible moments. Automation quietly solves this too, because a scheduled transfer never panics, never reads the news. It just keeps calmly buying while you're losing your mind. Which brings us to the final piece of the machine, and the one number that quietly devours fortunes. Step 4. You've crossed the line, you've got the order right, you've automated the whole thing. So what does that money actually buy once it lands? This is where people overthink themselves into paralysis. They assume investing means picking stocks, studying charts, guessing the next big winner. It doesn't. For you, investing means buying exactly one boring thing: a low-cost index fund, a single fund that quietly hands you a slice of 500 of the biggest companies in America, all at once. You're not betting on one company, you're not trying to look clever, you're simply buying the whole board and betting the economy keeps expanding overall, which, across any long stretch of history, it always has. But there's a trap lurking in this step, and it's a sneaky one because it's dressed up as sophistication. Fees. Remember that number I told you to hang on to? This is it. Watch what 1% does. Say you invest $10,000 and leave it alone for 30 years. Put it in a cheap index fund charging almost nothing, and compare that to a fancy, managed fund charging 1% a year. That 1% sounds tiny, but stretched across 30 years, that small fee quietly devours around $40,000 of your future money on a single $10,000 investment. The fee ends up bigger than what you started with. And you'd assume you're paying for something better, right? Higher fees, smarter people, stronger returns. Except the data says the opposite. Over long stretches of time, the vast majority of those expensive, professionally managed funds fail to beat the plain, cheap index they're supposedly outsmarting. You're paying a premium for a product that usually underperforms the free version. It's like hiring a private chef who mostly just reheats a worse version of the same frozen meal you could have grabbed yourself. Wealthy people know this, so they buy the cheap index and pocket the fee, and that fee kept over a lifetime is worth a small house. There's one more gear that the truly wealthy use, and while you don't need it, understanding it explains a lot. When a wealthy person needs cash, they often don't sell off their investments, because selling means stepping off the compounding train and handing a chunk to the government in taxes. Instead, they borrow against what they already own. The assets stay invested and keep growing while they spend the borrowed money. Their portfolio never stops working. Compare that to how most people scrape together cash in a pinch. They sell something off, or worse, raid the retirement account they spent years building. One group borrows against the machine and keeps it humming. The other takes a wrench to it, sells it for parts, then wonders why the growth stopped. You don't need to play that particular game, you just need to stop taking a wrench to your own machine every time life gets expensive. All right, you've now got the entire machine, the line, the order, the automation, the cheap fund. Which brings us to why any of this actually matters, the engine that turns these boring steps into real wealth. Compounding, and specifically why it feels like a scam right up until the moment it doesn't. Here's the honest truth about compounding. For years, it looks completely broken. You invest, you check the balance, and it barely moves. This is exactly where Greg would have bailed even if he had crossed the line, because the early stretch is genuinely unimpressive. But compounding isn't addition, it's acceleration. Your money earns money, and then that money starts earning money too, and the curve doesn't climb in a straight line. It bends upwards slowly at first, and then violently. It's the world's slowest magic trick. You sit bored for what feels like forever, and then the final act happens so fast it looks like someone cheated. Let me make it concrete. Say you invest $500 a month at a normal long-term return of about 7% after inflation. After 10 years, you've got roughly $86,000. Feels sluggish, but keep going. After 20 years, $260,000. After 30, over $600,000. After 40 years, north of $1.2 million from $500 a month. The final decade alone adds more than the first 20 combined. Because by that point, it's no longer your contributions carrying the weight, it's growth compounding on top of growth. This is exactly what Grace quietly lived through. For the first few years, her invested account barely edged ahead of Greg's savings, close enough that he felt a little smug about it. Then somewhere around year 7, the gap started widening every single month. By year 10, the growth alone was adding more than she was even contributing. Same paycheck as Greg, same decade. She just crossed the line early and let acceleration handle the entire second half of the work. Which is exactly why the single most expensive mistake isn't picking the wrong fund, it's waiting. Watch this. 2 people each invest $500 a month at 7%. One starts at 25, the other waits until 35. Same amount, same return, both stop at 65. The one who started at 25 ends up with around $1.37 million. The one who waited a decade ends up with about $740,000. Here's how to actually feel the weight of that number. That 10-year delay didn't just cost $60,000 in skipped deposits, it cost $700,000 in future money that simply never had the chance to exist. Those dollars weren't spent. They were never born. That's what waiting really costs you, not a smaller pile, but a graveyard of money that never got the chance to grow up. So the machine really is that simple. Cross the line, order your dollars correctly, automate it, buy the cheap fund, then wait longer than feels comfortable. That's the whole thing. That's how saving turns into investing, and how investing turns into actual wealth. But I promised you honesty, and here's about the part most of these videos conveniently skip. You cannot invest a surplus you don't have, and right now a huge chunk of people simply don't have one. Around 59% of Americans can't cover a surprise $1,000 expense out of savings. More than half say they're living paycheck to paycheck. When your money runs out before the month does, telling you to just automate your investing isn't advice, it's a joke at your expense. So let's be honest about what's really happening here. Wealthy people hold 2 advantages, not 1. The first is that they actually have a surplus to deploy. That advantage is real, it's structural, and no 10-minute video is going to hand it to you. Plus, the cost of living, the entire tilted playing field, that's a genuine systemic problem. And pretending it's really about your coffee habit was always a lie. But the second advantage is the system itself, the line, the order, the automation, the cheap fund, the patience. And that advantage isn't locked behind a paywall or a bloodline. That one is just information, and I've now handed you all of it. For the millions of people who do have even a small surplus, $25 a week, $50, whatever manages to survive the month, knowing this system is worth 6 figures over a lifetime. The real tragedy isn't only that some people can't cross the line, is that so many people who actually could never do, simply because nobody ever pointed out where the line was. And that's genuinely why I make these videos. If you want to take it a step further and build a surplus that doesn't depend on your job at all, I run a free school community where I break down exactly how to build and scale a faceless YouTube channel from zero, using everything I've picked up across more than 10 channels of my own. That's how a lot of people actually create the surplus. This whole video depends on in the first place. It's free, the link's in the description, and I'll walk you through the whole thing step by step. Greg could have had the same salary as Grace, the same cushion, the same decade. He had the surplus. What he never had was the 20-minute afternoon and the one decision that turned his puddle into a river. That's the entire gap between them. Not income, not luck, not some hidden secret, just a line, and the choice to actually step over it. And Greg was never the villain in this story. Greg is just the version of you that keeps doing the responsible-looking thing that quietly loses anyway. The good news is you get to decide which one you become, and you get to decide that starting today. So here's the question, worth sitting with long after this video ends. Look at your own money right now, not what you earn, what you're actually doing with what's already sitting there. Is it working, or is it just parked at the edge of the line, waiting for a permission you were always allowed to give it yourself? Cross the line. Everything after that is just steps. If you want the full free walkthrough on building an income stream of your own, our school community is waiting for you. Links are in the description. And one quick reminder, I'm not a financial advisor. This video is for educational purposes only. And whatever happens next depends entirely on the decisions you make. I'll see you in the next one.